Hey everyone, before we get into this week's Idle Thumbs, I just want to let you know that Danielle Riendeau's new podcast, Idle Weekend, co-hosted by her and Rob Zachney of 3 Moves Ahead and Esports Today, is live with their first episode. So if you want to check that out this week, you should go to idleweekend.net. It's coming out every Friday, so yeah, good to end the bad ad. Are you going to leave that in? It's December 16th, 2015.
This is Idle Thumbs 241. I'm Chris Remo.
I'm Nick Brecken.
And I'm Jake Rodkin.
Hey, guys.
Hey.
Early morning podcast going on.
Another one of those.
Yep.
It's the best.
Yep.
The good ones.
Mm-hmm. So this is a loosely defined topic, I guess, but a thing that seems to have just inadvertently coalesced over the last week is that there have been a bunch of games announced from like series that have gone untouched for a long time, or people where it is just notable for them to be announcing a game right now. So like last night, Hideo Kojima, he I guess is just taking the same studio name he had at Konami and just making a game for Sony with it, which is crazy. Amazing to me that he's allowed to do that.
Was Kojima Productions or Kojima? I'm bad at pronouncing a name.
Was one of them? The first one was Kojima,
and this one's Kojima. was that actually a Konami owned brand? Because I know a lot
did he weirdly independently own that?
Right, and then it was consulting in through or something like that. Like
he was an employee, though, for sure.
Like
right?
the guy who was the creative director and creator of a bunch of the Smash Brothers games, whose name I cannot remember now.
Mizuguchi?
Is that?
No, Sakurai, Masahiro Sakurai.
Yeah.
Mizuguchi announced a new Rez game, which is another one of the things I wanted to talk about.
Smash Brothers guy, I don't know if he was at, I think worked for HAL Laboratories, which was a studio entirely owned by Nintendo, but then he split off, started his own sort of consulting company, to make, and then that label then became involved in Smash Brothers, even though it seemed like he was maybe trying to go and do something else. Then he immediately got pulled back into Smash Brothers. But I think that he now technically works for his own company with his own label that is still basically just a first-party Nintendo thing.
But in the case of Kojima, I don't really think he ever... I feel like he was an employee of Konami for 30 years.
I wish we actually knew the details of this, because maybe the notion of Kojima Productions never existed as a business entity before, and it was just a hilarious label.
That has actually always been my assumption.
Yeah.
My assumption has
and now
always
he's like, well, I guess we never trademarked this. I guess it was never a real company. Boom. I did it.
My assumption was always just that he just worked there as an employee. There was the team that he led, and at a certain point, when he was a notable enough person that he had the clout to do it, he basically said, I want this team to use the imprint, essentially, Kojima Productions.
So it's like if Sonic Team somehow jumped out of Sega and started a company called Sonic Team, but this time it was a real company and not just a particular group inside of their design group.
Exactly, yeah. They make audio games. They're making new Rez.
Oh, man. God, that'd be so confusing. Sonic Team presents.
Presents weird VR suit.
So, okay, there's Kojima doing new stuff, new Rez. What are the other list items? And
there's Psychonauts 2 and Psychonauts VR thing. There's System Shock 3 was just confirmed after being teased for about a week. System Shock 3 is also being developed by Other Side Entertainment, which is also making Underworld Ascension, which is effectively Ultima Underworld 3. That was not brand newly announced, but is because of the System Shock 3 stuff, I've been reading a bunch about that.
Okay, so my question for you, because you brought this topic up, I guess, is what differentiates this rash of these from post Broken Age, Kickstarter, Brian Fargo's bringing back Wasteland, every adventure game developer is bringing back Cyan, the guys who made Myst brought a new game back, new Star Citizen. Like, it feels like we had a rash of these a couple of years ago that have just kind of been percolating and succeeding or failing since like 2012.
I guess there's no. I mean, I guess in terms of the impetus for creation, there's not a radical difference, but in this case, they seem to all basically be funded through completely different means. You know, they're all just kind of. It's not like the thing you described was like a Kickstarter wave,
right?
Whereas this is more. I guess it's just coincidence that all this stuff.
It might also be like when you mentioned it, I thought that maybe this is potentially sort of the second wave after the Kickstarter thing happened. Is now like, oh, it turns out that these things have the potential to be successful. Just doing straight up. Reach your hand into the back, into like that games history grab bag and pull creators and games out of them and put money into them. And also...
also here, sorry, another thing that we never really talked about on the podcast was that System Shock, the original System Shock is getting remade also.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Which, you know...
I didn't know that.
Yes, it looks actually really cool. It's the exact thing that I always talk about in terms of making a game of that type and era in the modern era, which is obviously running it at high resolution, you know, modern computers, but targeting a sort of like late 90s, maybe more like early 2000s level of sort of graphical complexity.
How to keep your game with the systemic intensity of System Shock without paying for like the crazy IK hand and like the Order or whatever that game was. Wasn't that the...
Whatever.
Where just everything was just as expensive as it could possibly be to the point that it gassed itself, basically. This rash of sequels and creators coming back, even though I find myself excited about a bunch of them, it also reminds me, it feels like games have always, like the games industry, the heavy commercial games industry, actually fuck that, all games have been about sequels forever, right? Like every game, like every game scale has, because it's really easy to sequelize games, but this type of sequelization of sort of bringing something back feels very much like what we're seeing in movies right now also. Like
they sort of like digging into the nostalgia bin.
Right. It's like, which IPs do we have from the vault that we can leverage in a, you know, like, is the audience finally ready for us to bring back this?
Well, it's like what happened, I think, when Fallout 3, Fallout 3 was first announced, which is like, okay, there's this core of people who remember this and play this, but then there's this way bigger group of people who are ambiently aware of the sort of prestige sheen that kind of glances over the collective memory of this series in the gaming consciousness, and we're going to tap into that. And so all the people who think of themselves as like sort of highly aware video game players who maybe never played this particular game, but just take it on faith.
They're excited about the
Fallout
prestige.
1 and 2 are like
the sort of
classic, amazing.
The prestige and reputation of Fallout coming back. Do you think that reaching even farther back to sort of bringing back from the dead old IPs? Do you think that like we talked about Grand Theft Auto 1 and 2 a few weeks back about the sort of like lasciviousness of them, or like the sort of like they feel like you found
like
some
contraband
like, you feel like like you found the forbidden fruit of gaming in GTA 1 and 2, and its reputation was never as like it had a very different reputation as Fallout and definitely a smaller one. But do you think that there was any banking on that in the in early press response when they said we're making a Grand Theft Auto 3, or do you think that it was just completely like
I can't remember. I don't think I was aware like at the time that Grand Theft Auto 3 came out, which was 2001.
Yeah.
I don't think I was tapped into the gaming press. Certainly not the console gaming
My
press.
vague memories of how that was covered were that the 3 was superfluous and that people were basically saying, oh yeah, this used to be games. But the thing that's interesting about this is it's a real world where you can do everything and all the GTA talking points.
Like Duke Nukem 3D, another game that we did not mention when we were talking about games with forgotten earlier titles, but Duke Nukem 3D is maybe the most extreme example of that, in that almost nobody who is currently playing games has played Duke Nukem 1 and 2.
Right.
Yeah.
Although I did, because I had them on shareware.
Yeah, I did too. I was really into the Apogee and id side-scrolling games.
Yeah. And the epic ones.
To tangent off of that for half a second, did you see that, it was, I don't know if it was Romero, but it was some...
Oh, yeah, Romero.
Yeah.
The Super Mario Brothers 3.
Yeah, so id Software made the Commander Keen games, which were like EGA, CGA side-scrollers for PC in the early 90s, I guess.
Yeah.
And they were really notable at the time because it was a PC game that had smooth scrolling and movement and jumping like you'd see on a Nintendo game, which was, it seems really like a no-brainer now, but I think it was a big deal because it was really hard to get movement like that out of PC hardware, which was not built the way that a game console was at the time for doing graphics like that. It was like Carmack's first big notable graphics task. But what Romero revealed...
The ability for Mario to go backwards, famously known as Carmack's reverse.
Fuck! Oh my god! That is...
Not true.
That is like the most insanely horrible knot of a reference that... like, you're welcome, JP.
Just look up Carmack's reverse. I don't know what it is, but you can find it on Wikipedia probably.
Some real-time shadow hack of some kind, I think. But man, I can't remember what Carmack's reverse is because we're all terrible. We know how to make a joke about Carmack's reverse without knowing what it is. Sorry, the thing I was getting to is that the sort of pipeline that powered Commander Keen apparently started off as a pitch id Software made before they were named id Software to Nintendo for bringing Mario Brothers 3 or a Mario game to the PC.
They worked on it while they were at the company that they were like prior to id Software. Yeah, Softdisk. Yeah. Like Carmack was just like doing it in his spare time.
Yeah, and there's a YouTube video that John Romero posted that's like a shitty Mario clone. But it's impressive as all hell because it's running on a computer that should have no business doing like really nice looking, like it's
smooth scrolling and all.
Yeah, like Mario's jump physics aren't as good, and there's some weird stuff in it that very much looks like Commander Keen. But at the same time, it's crazy that they just cold pitched Nintendo on, oh, we can make Mario on computers, and they said no. I mean, I guess you technically can, but you will not. So they instead made Commander Keen, and. It's just so crazy to me that id Software was effectively born as let's be a Mario port house.
Yeah. The early history of computer game studios is incredible. It's so different than how early console games developed, which even in their earliest days were much more like traditional companies. One of the companies in the U.S. that was more of a traditional business, I suppose, was Looking Glass Studios, which was founded by Paul Neurath. And he is actually one of the founders, or maybe the founder of Other Side Entertainment, which is making System Shock 3 and Underworld Ascendant, which is definitely intended to be a follow-up to the Ultima Underworld games. And looking into this, because of all these game announcements, it's crazy how many people they're rounding up at Other Side who date back to that era. Paul Neurath, obviously, and then also Tim Stelmach, who worked on Ultima Underworld 1 and 2, and I think was the lead on Underworld 2, and then also worked on Thief 1 and 2, and I believe was the lead on Thief 2, and several other Looking Glass games. Also, he was the project lead of Doom 3. Also, at Other Side are a couple people I worked with at Irrational, including Rob Waters, who is a concept artist who did the like original box art for System Shock 1, which is a really crazy, weird, interesting piece of artwork. And he's an amazing painter and an amazing concept artist, and was hugely instrumental in most of the incredibly iconic imagery of the original BioShock, but also worked on System Shock and all those games at Looking Glass. I think a lot of the people who were part of that whole world of Looking Glass sort of immersive sim games of the 90s and early 2000s sort of did a lot of their really important work before like an individual video game designer could kind of become a known personality on the internet, the way that happens now. And so I think a lot of those guys just kind of kept being sort of just line level working game developers, and the resurgence of all of this sort of nostalgia leveraging has allowed a lot of them to go back to the kinds of games that they cut their teeth on and that were really important, but were always kind of cult hits commercially. So it's been interesting reading up about this stuff.
Yeah.
I want to play all these games.
Yeah, I know. That's the thing that I was going to ask is, do you think like do you think that this is good or bad, or do you have any read on it like that? But I also don't know if it matters because I just am...
In a way, it doesn't surprise me that these sorts of people are the ones that have been able to sort of stick around in the industry, because they're the... Like, if you...
They're nuts and bolts.
Yeah, designers. I mean, like, yeah. I worked with a lot of these types at Bethesda and Arcane, and like, these are the guys that just, like, after the, doors shut at 6 o'clock, they're still inside working until 10 because they want to, figure out some system. You know what I mean? Like, they're just, like... that kind of game developer that just like lives and breathes all that stuff. So it feels
as opposed to screaming at 3 a.m. because you have to like place 4,000 rocks for your like your like your content heavy scenario or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and because they have to actually be able to like very tangibly solve a design problem. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about this today. Like, a lot of these people came up through very traditional means. So Tim Stelmach, I believe, started as QA on the original Ultima Underworld in like 1991 or whenever that was, and just straight up worked his way up. But so I've never worked with that guy, although I know a lot of people who have. I have worked with a lot of people who have worked with him. And my impression is just that strain of game designer is just a really practical, nuts and bolts, like figure shit out game designer in a way that isn't necessarily what modern game design at a sort of current high-level AAA scale is. Right. It can be. It depends on the game you're working on.
I mean, when I hear about the resurgences like this happening, my concern is that this could be the game equivalent of, like, at its best, a forgotten pop musician playing Vegas, or at its worst, playing the county fair circuit.
It could be noodling, like
right. Like this could just be, I'm booked at the Luxor for a year, or you'll see me at the Sonoma County Fair. Yeah. But even at that worst, if that turns out to be the case for some of these projects, I'm happy that these people are working at all in the industry right now, and at its best, hopefully it is not that at all, right? Hopefully it is just like something like we get some really great, passionate projects out of this.
Yeah, for sure. Man, and then there's stuff that is unrelated to that entirely, like Rez, like the new Rez, which includes crazy. Like, what is that thing? Does anyone know what that thing is?
I was at PlayStation Experience, and I did not see the Rez demo because it was a closed door demo. I had the opportunity to go see it, but I ended up passing to let some of their folks go. It was me or one of the designers of Super Hypercube, and I was like, you have to go in this room and wear this, because Super Hypercube feels like a spiritual, not successor, but like heavily influenced by Rez. But
it's a post-Rez game.
So sure. Rez was announced for PlayStation VR or some new.
I guess Rez is a remake, not a.
It's now called Rez Infinity or something.
Yeah, there's like a new.
And it seems like it's somewhere between a remake and a sequel, but it's for PlayStation VR, which seems like an amazing use of a VR headset for me, because I love VR stuff that is abstract and not trying to be about.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, now you're actually inside of, basically like Star Wars or Skyrim or something. Yeah, you're not. It's instead of trying to present an alternate reality, it's presenting a thing that absolutely cannot exist in reality.
It is actually presenting an alternate reality.
Yes,
this is a different interpretation of what reality
virtual reality
could be. Reality could be fucking weird laser
cubes
lines
and lasers. And,
But the thing that made the PSX demo incredibly notable is, do you remember when Rez came out, you could get the Rez like trance vibrator, basically, which is a little plug you'd plug into your system, and it was just a little thing that would go and pulse with the game.
Yeah, definitely the lewdest video game accessory ever.
Okay, but here's the thing, though. The demo that they had at PSX had a vibrating bodysuit that you put on. The photo, so it's like a skin-tight suit that just has these round pods at various parts of your body. I don't think there was a crotch one, but like they're all over the place.
There will be.
So I mean, you could just sort of
handy tips on how to transform the like elbow of your your Rez suit.
The photos that came out of the PSX demo, I don't even know exactly how it worked. I don't know if Sean did the demo or not, but I know that Cable Sasser of Panic Software, who's one of the company funding our game Firewatch, wore the suit, and he put a photo of himself up on Twitter, and it looked like 90s virtual reality to the max, because it was like he had the PlayStation VR headset on, and
it looked like what it looks like in Murder, She Wrote when you
when Jessica Fletcher is in VR, because the PlayStation VR headset it has head tracking, but it uses a camera to do it. So the headset itself just emits blue light out of all of its corners in this geometric pattern. So it looks like it
just looks like you're in Rez.
Yes,
the person playing Rez.
And then he's wearing this full black, like skin tight bodysuit that has all these sort of red and black outlined circles all over it, and he's just sort of gesturing with two move controllers towards the camera with his headset on, looking kind of confused, and it just looks like the world. The Rez VR game presents an alternate reality, but also it brings that reality to our reality by making you strap on glowing headsets and like controllers and wearing a black like neon red and black bodysuit, apparently. So you
that's the best.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
They were unclear on whether or not that bodysuit is actually going to be a thing that ships, I think, or if it is just like a thing that is brought around, or if they can come up with a more consumery version of it. Because who the fuck is going to buy a skin tight vibrating bodysuit to play Rez? Some people. But not that's a manufacturing pipeline that is probably hard to justify if you're Sony.
That seems like the kind of thing that you maybe sell like 100 of.
Yeah.
Or something.
I mean, I guess this is coming from the company that
never passed down. There's no resale market for these skin tight suits.
Washing instructions.
It's not a GameStop moneymaker.
You can't.
Yeah.
Bespoke Rez bodysuit tailored individually.
Whole cloth.
Send inseam measurements before purchasing.
Though I guess Sony is the company that, for the anniversary of the PlayStation 1, made a version of the PlayStation 3 that basically uses all of the coloration and decoration
I never saw that.
Oh, it was really beautiful. Cool. It's like the best looking PS4 is the PS1 anniversary PS4, where it's in like a really polished light gray, and then they have all the original colors on the face or on the buttons and controller and stuff. It's really nice, and everyone wanted one, and they made like none of them. They were so fucking hard to get. Even people at Sony were like, "Yeah, I don't have one. No one here has one."
Yeah,
man, that's crazy.
Yeah, so maybe they're gonna make a Rez bodysuit and only make a few hundred of them.
That looks really nice.
Yeah,
I just found it.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
That looks more like a future object than any of the recent consoles.
I know. They put that out and everyone said, God, why doesn't the PS4 just look like this? And the answer is probably because it's not dark black. It doesn't look like stereo equipment that will blend into your media center, so people won't buy it. But I want one. So I can then, if they also made a gray PlayStation VR headset.
Oh, my God.
And a bodysuit to match, you could just you could live the 90s dream to the max.
The 20th anniversary PS4 starts at $1,200 on Amazon.
Jeez. Yeah.
It's the Ollie Moss screen print of video game hardware.
I was just actually thinking that.
The Ollie Moss Star Wars poster.
Yeah.
Of PlayStations.
Man.
All right.
Should we take a break?
Sure. You guys had another thing to talk about.
Oh, well, you played Crusader Kings too. So.
I did.
Yeah, let's talk Crusader Kings 2 before we go.
All right. I dove back into Crusader Kings 2 after, I guess, like a 2-year hiatus. It's been about that.
Give a recap of what this game is.
So Crusader Kings 2 is it's a Paradox grand strategy game. You can, it's if you've seen anything like Total War, et cetera, these are like games with large maps, and if you've played Hearts of Iron or any of these things, they're all sort of similar. Europa Universalis, akin to these things. But
this game is like feels fundamentally different to me than those games.
Yeah,
because of all of the dynasty stuff.
This is
and
true.
How personal scale.
Yeah, it diverges from those in that it is less about going to war and more about managing your dynastic future, I guess is the way you would say. Like it's not really about sort of plotting your next takeover. It's about kind of figuring out how to marry.
But that takeover is like via crazy arranged marriages and assassination plots,
and faked documents and just like bizarre machinations. So So Chris and I played a ton of this game for a little bit, and we streamed it. And you can actually find it on, I guess, the YouTube, the Idle Thumbs YouTube page, probably still.
If you search for Idle Thumbs Crusader Kings or Idle Thumbs Ragnar, you'll probably find it.
Yeah. I think there's a playlist of it on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/idle videos, which also, by the way, has annotated YouTube versions of every single Idle Thumbs episode, thanks to our community member, Johnny Driggs, who does that every single week. which is amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. As just like an example of what is good about Crusader Kings 2, this is a tweet from, I think, last year that sort of made the rounds again recently. The tweet says, the Crusader Kings 2 Steam forums are amazing out of context. And then the image is just a straight screenshot of the Steam forums for Crusader Kings 2 with just thread headlines, just line after line. And here are some of the thread headlines. My elderly male king was impregnated by his gay lover. Sexual intercourse at an older age is dangerous. So I executed the Pope and nothing much happened. How do you kidnap someone? How to assassinate a person if no one joins you? Destroying Catholic Church. My family is dying. Crusading for Jerusalem against the Jews? ? I hate the Pope! ! The one true faith is now unstoppable. Need help with dumb son-in-law. A child with unknown father, my bastards? ? So that's why this game is good.
Yeah.
So what was your recent experience, Nick?
So when we played, I believe we downloaded the just vanilla Crusader Kings 2. I don't think we had added any of the add-ons. So I got the Crusader Kings 2 Complete Edition, which I had no idea how much DLC is available for this game.
Oh yeah,
it is a list as long as your arm.
Always have stuff like that.
So without really having the time to even vet like which like pack is good or anything, I just turned them all on. And so that's the setup for the story. So I'm playing the game and I decide that I'm going to just choose something that is this, like a sort of starting scenario that feels fairly safe. And so I picked William the Conqueror in 1066 or thereabouts. And William the Conqueror was the Norman king, the first king of England, basically, and he was the Duke of Normandy and came and invaded England and took it over. And so that's the sort of the starting point. You are the king of England, and everything is fine, and it's like the easiest possible, one of the easiest possible scenarios. Mm-hmm. So I started playing, and I kind of like felt, even though it's been a while,
think piece. Why being born as William the First is easy mode.
So, we'd played enough that I kind of felt like this is going to be like riding a bike. I'll just kind of go for it. I'll pick an easy scenario and maybe just see how far, because we played as like Ireland.
Yeah, we played,
which was hard.
No, but
this is a hard Scrabble.
No. I mean, it was introduced to us. The reason we played that is because people recommended it as like, good and like not too intense.
Well, because nobody's really picking a fight with you.
Yeah.
But it was hard in the sense that if you actually want to do anything, you're not going to do anything. You're Irish.
You're just Ireland.
You're just so I was like, well, I guess I'll just, pick England and I'll just take it easy for the first few years and just see how it goes. And then maybe, sort of pick some minor aspirations. Maybe I'll go after Scotland, whatever. So I'm playing, and the first thing that happens to me, maybe 2 years in, is that I get a message saying that I guess my daughter had married into the French line of succession or something, and then suddenly I was just also the king of France.
Yes.
Just happened out of nowhere, which I don't think actually, it didn't happen in history. So this wasn't just something like, it just happened. Like it was just some
things
kind of
tumbled down.
Things just sort of tumbled down to the point. And suddenly I've just got like this huge, like the, the way the map adjusts, like it just dynamically like creates a real looking, like a realistically, labeled world map. And so now the word England is just stretching across like the Roman Empire, just this huge landmass. And it's not like riding a bike. I had no idea what I was doing. And so I'm just like,
man, so you had the Crusader Kings 2 version of like King Ralph happen to you.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. So rather than try and take it easy, I kind of felt like, well, I guess I'll just sort of Donald Trump my way into this and just start throwing elbows around and just like, well, no, I'm the king of France now. I'll just like find out who's next in the line and so.
And murder them.
Yeah. So the Duke of Anjou was... So you can actually look under one of the tabs and see... because, the way these things work in history is that even though you are currently the king of France, unless you have somebody lined up in succession, there are other claimants to that position. And so my son was not actually lined up to be the king of France. It was this Duke of Anjou guy. And so I just started buying...
He's got to go.
Yeah, well, I just started paying off everybody else in France other than that guy. Just started handing out all the French money that I had just received to basically every lord in France. And then...
So that they would support you or your son.
If there was anything to happen. And then I looked at that guy, and he had a son. And so I immediately plotted to assassinate his son. Yeah, I don't really know why I plotted to assassinate his son and not him. His son was 6 years old.
It's more vindictive. Easier. You're gonna. Yeah, it's a baby.
Yeah,
he's basically a baby, even though he's a human who can walk and talk and stuff.
So during the plotting of that the Duke of Anjou somehow, I guess, probably just realized that I was, plotting to kill his son. I think he may have just noticed, and then just dynamically decided to revolt and split off and go independent and try and claim the throne. And so the way this all trickled down is that now I have this enormous French army that is basically occupying Anjou while there's a plot to assassinate the Duke of Anjou's son going on. And so there was this weird moment where all of this coalesced. I was sieging the Duke's castle while an assassin snuck in and killed his 6-year-old son. And then the next day, I destroyed his castle and took everything over and crushed the rebellion and everything was fine. And I was like, well, that was amazing. I wiped out that whole line. I installed my son Robert on to be the successor of the French throne. I was like, well, this is actually easy. I'm William the Conqueror, whatever. 2 days later, everything just took a turn. The Holy Roman Emperor was like, you can't kill 6-year-olds. Declared war. The Holy Roman Empire is just basically in every phase of the game is just this massive just force. They're the most powerful faction. And then while the day after that happened, the guy that I had actually been trying to install to line up the succession with my son, he had a brother, and that brother was, I guess, getting just angry that I had spent all this time just basically lining up his older brother just for all this power. Some faction supporting him for the line of succession.
I like that it's he has a brother instead of I have another son.
No, because
that I think really explains the dynamic going.
All these people are
he might be less than happy about. My son has some weird guy. I guess it's his brother.
I don't know who he is. I'm too busy. I'm the king of England and France, Chris. I don't have time for this. So this faction supporting him splits off and starts a civil war, and within England to basically remove me from the throne. So he's trying to depose his father now, and maybe a day after that happens, this weird Christmas music starts playing, which it's like Joy to the World, but they've redone it with Crusader Kings lyrics. It's bizarre. I don't. So suddenly I'm like,
should have vetted that DLC more carefully.
This is this is an interesting Joy to the World. Okay, wait, what? Burn England to the ground. Joy to the World. What is that? What? Just there are all these bizarre conquering lyrics that they've thrown in. And then amidst this just insane civil war, Holy Roman, invasion, 60,000 Aztecs just land on the shores of England and just start, just burning everything.
Aztecs?
Aztecs! Literally 60,000 Aztec, the horde, just Aztec hordes have just come from South America and land. Just everything just crumbled. I was removed from power in a day. And I looked and there's this weird Aztec DLC that just, I guess, is not very popular with the community. And they basically outsourced one of their DLCs to some other studio.
Weird.
And it's completely historically inaccurate. And they did it, I guess, specifically to balance the fact that the Mongolian DLC creates a weird thing where if you're on the west side of the map, because the Mongols are coming from the east, then you're just sort of, at an advantage. And so they balance that by then just saying, what if the Aztecs made 1 billion ships and just sailed across the ocean and burned England to the ground? It's so, there's just this weird, This is like Australia,
where they kept they introduced an invasive species to kill a native species, and then they just spent a century introducing additional invasive species to kill all the other ones that they killed.
So the end game of this is that Crusader Kings has an alien invasion mod that comes in.
Basically, yeah.
That's an amazing analogy, Chris.
Thanks.
Yeah, it is. So anyway, that was kind of the end of that.
I'm just
gonna have to remove all the DLC because I don't know what any of it does, but it just seems to destroy you.
What was the Christmas music? Where did that?
I don't know. It was really weird. A lot of stuff's been added this game.
It's the Aztec war chant.
Yeah.
Classic. We wish you a Merry Christmas. Parentheses Aztec traditional.
All right, well, you want to take a break?
Yeah.
Video game. This episode of Idle Thumbs is brought to you by Shari's Berries, provider of absolutely massive strawberries dipped in chocolate and other good things. They're huge. They're really, really big and really good. And though Shari's Berries has been a sponsor of this podcast before, this is a unique deal that is being offered this time. So if you go to berries.com, that's berries.com, click the microphone in the top right-hand corner and type in thumbs, you not only get the traditional deal that we offer, which is a 40% savings, so freshly dipped strawberries starting at $19.99. There is today only, literally just today, with the thumbs code, you can double the berries for only $5. Double the berries for $5 today only. Usually with our code, you double the berries for $10. Get on this today. We are getting into dangerous holiday territory here in terms of you're running out of time to act on your gift and self-pleasing needs. Strawberries in chocolate will do it for you. If you go to berries.com, berries.com, click that microphone, type in thumbs, today only, double those berries for $5. They come in a nice sort of refrigerated little package. We've gotten them numerous times.
You should double them.
Berries.com, click that microphone, type in thumbs.
Nice.
Video game.
Hey.
Are we back?
Yeah. So we should probably talk about frog fractions. We should catch up on frog fractions because...
I think that's true.
Because there was an article... Okay, well, actually, Frog Fractions 2 information has come to light. And has been coming to light for a while, but I think we should back up and explain what Frog Fractions is because we talked about it in an episode maybe a year ago.
Or more.
Frog Fractions is a video game.
I mean, the game came out more than 2 years ago, so that's probably when we talked about it.
Yeah. Frog Fractions was a game made by a company called Twinbeard, I think.
Yeah. Which is basically a guy, Jim Crawford.
It's Jim Crawford. It's one guy. Who actually records podcasts in this very room.
In this room.
So we'll get back to that, though, because podcasts play into Frog Fractions 2 in a strange way.
Yeah.
But Frog Fractions was a game which presented as an edutainment game where you're a frog in a pond who sort of you eat bugs with your tongue just to solve math problems, right?
So basically.
More or less.
Yeah.
But then the game devolves into complete madness where you disappear down below the lake and end up inside of weird political intrigue and science fiction things where you end up on Mars and it becomes a text adventure.
And you go through a dozen different game genres.
Yeah, it becomes a text adventure for part of it. It just Frog Fractions, the less said about it, the better, other than to know that it is insane and a really fun experience to play. Jim Crawford announced that Frog Fractions 2 would exist, and he did a Kickstarter for it. But it was sort of stated, but probably even more than it was stated, it was just implied and assumed by everyone that however Frog Fractions 2 was revealed, it would be some sort of insane and cryptic means.
Well, because even in the Kickstarter, he was like, "I will tell you what game Frog Fractions 2 is." Like at an it was like there will be a game that will end up being Frog Fractions 2, essentially.
Yes. So, that was a while ago now, and Justin McElroy at Polygon wrote an article that has caught up on many of, but not all of the events that have happened in what is
more
sort of
than a year of.
Yeah, it's Frog Fractions 2's like announcement / reveal has turned into what is kind of an ARG, but also seems like it's just a complete string of just madness, just like absurdist nonsense that kind of loosely strings together into an alternate reality game. But I want to run through a highlight reel of some of the things that have been revealed, just because it gets increasingly absurd and really awesome, actually. So the very first Kickstarter video that they put out, it included a reference to just a single HTML file, which if you then went to the Twinbeard website and typed in blah, 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 .html from that video, it somehow led you to twinbread.com, which is a website that was about bread. But inside of that page, there's all sorts of insane things, including there's an ROT13.html file, which leads to a GBA ROM that presents to be Castlevania, and then turns into, I guess, a Rickroll that contains a bunch of other secret information in it. There's also a page on the Twin Bread website that is instructions on how to make bread, but the text on that page is valid entry into the Frog Fractions 1 text adventure segment. And when you type that stuff in, it leads you to a Barack Obama beard shaving simulator game that you can download and play, which ends on a fake Twitter page, which has fake tweets including GPS coordinates, which led to the UC Berkeley campus and specified a date and time, and fans went there and met Jim Crawford, who was then abducted in real life by time travelers for possessing bug pornography. He dropped a paper bag when he was abducted, which contained floppy disks, and those floppy disks had bug pornography on them. And also... and those images had EXIF data, which included weird, like, rhyming couplets that didn't rhyme, and also apparently the word butts is a recurring theme. And all
butts seems to come up a lot.
God, what what is the craziest shit? I'm trying to remember where it came from. There's all sorts of insane stuff. Like there's a .arg compressed file that was found and people were unable to decode it, and it was password protected, and it took like 6 months or something for people to decode it, and then it ended up that the code was the words 0451 spelled out, which was also a code mentioned in the Kickstarter video, but as a number.
Yeah, and
so
also
like someone wrote,
going back to all those other games we're talking about. Is a reference to Fahrenheit 451 that has basically been in every immersive sim computer game.
The first combo lock-in and every Looking Glass Heritage game. Apparently, that was figured out because someone actually wrote a password brute forcing tool that is sat there crunching on the archive file. For hours or days or however long until it finally was like, oh, it's 0451 weeks. Yeah. It took 6 months for people to break this. And then the unlocked video is a live action recreation of the original Frog Fractions, which people don't know what it means yet. Also, Jim Crawford started recording a podcast called Train Hot Dog, which
I remember when he started releasing this.
Yes, this is just his train ride home. He'll record a podcast, but that podcast now also contains insane things. Like one episode was brought to you by time-travel.club, which is another website that contains all sorts of stuff. The audio for this podcast contains those like slow scan images, or like if you view them,
like spectrograph.
Yeah, or if you view them on a spectrograph, there's URLs encoded in the audio waveform of these podcast episodes. Jesus. Also, they've started releasing Mario Maker levels, which contain Frog Fractions clues.
Oh my God.
It's fucking crazy. It's really good. Just like you can. Not all of the threads connect, and Justin McElroy suggests in this article probably correctly that not all of them will, because this seems like it's not
constructed on the fly. It's partly, but also partly long.
Yeah, there's some long plays interspersed with just we're fucking around and having a good time with like making this weird.
One of the things kind of decode to being an acronym for like Frog 1.5 or something, like suggesting that this like multi-year spanning crazy thing is in fact the bridge. Like
the login page for timetravel.club was activated soon after the waveforms, the spectrograph waveforms revealed Gadsby/password123, which was a username and password embedded in the audio of this podcast. And if you log into timetravel.club, you would get a message that there's a message from a commanding officer of the Time Travel Club, I guess, named Dwayne. But if you favorite that page, you find that its title is Future Resistance Operation Garrison 1.50 or Frog 1.5.
Yeah.
So presumably this ARG is also just Frog Fractions 1.5, which means it's just uncovering infinite absurdist mania that maybe has some sort of through line at the end.
Yeah.
And the article on Polygon sums a lot of it up really well. It's called How to Shave Obama Behind the Baffling Nearly 2-Year-Long Quest to Find Frog Fractions 2. And in it, Justin McElroy also links to the people who have been going crazy on this, all of their forums. And also there's like summary videos that these guys have posted containing a lot of the story of this. And also all of the artifacts have been archived and put into video format really well. So if you want to just really entertain yourself for a couple hours, but don't maybe want to dive into the psychotic miasma that is Frog Fractions 1.5, you can just read that article and use it as a good jumping point.
It's like EVE Online or something, where I'm never going to play that game, but I'm so glad that there are people who do.
Yes,
because it results in amazing things for me to read.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great thing to exist.
Yeah.
Also, if you haven't played Frog Fractions, you should go and play that. Frog Fractions is good.
Yep, it is. Nick, I know you were playing more Don't Starve Together. Do you have any more thoughts or stories from that, or
I don't really have any stories. I mean, it's I'm playing with my girlfriend Janelle, and the interesting thing that's happened recently is that I'm finding it's actually a really good game to play as a couple. Like, I think it actually cool. Like, in our relationship, we try to, we're living together and we're trying to constantly like find divisions of labor for like the chores and things. And like this game I'm finding is actually really helpful for learning how to do that in a really rational and like cooperative way. Because like the first few times we played did not go well as they do in Don't Starve. And, blame was placed in several different occasions. But now we've kind of like every like world seed, we get a little bit further and get a little bit better at kind of like dividing up. Like I'm the farm guy. It's weird too because our personalities are actually like coming out in the way that we're starting to play. Like like Janelle is much more independent, and so she's just constantly out in the wilderness, just like doing whatever.
Right.
And I've just like made peace with the fact that I'm just going to be the guy like building the base constantly and just wondering when she's coming home for dinner. It's really weird, like how it actually, because a lot of the systems are just about like eating and like doing chores and stuff that like,
that's really good.
A lot of that just gets reflected in the gameplay.
Yeah.
But we were actually doing really well now. So, and we're just doing really well in general, Chris. So,
well, good for you.
Anyway, that's no cool. Great stories. I mean,
that's a good.
It's not really a game that generates crazy stories very often. Just more like a general sense of a like a long form. Like, oh, I remember that like playthrough, the 50 day playthrough where like it just was crazy because we didn't have X. Like it's not like just weird things happen. It's sort of predictable in that way, but it's not. Anyway, it's good though. It's fun. I like it.
That's cool. Well,
you want to read reader mail from readers?
Okay, let's do it.
It's time for reader mail. It's the part where we read things that you send us in. If you have, that's a good description.
Yeah.
If you would like to send us an email, you can write us at questions@idlethumbs.net, and we will read it and sometimes talk about it on the podcast.
All right,
take that.
Okay, so our first email this week comes from Icebreaker, who's a very, very long time Idle Forums member, going all the way back to the pre-podcast version of our website. And he writes, Nick Bredon origin story.
Oh shit! I saw this.
Yeah. So apparently there may be multiple. I think there might be multiple Nick Bredon origin stories, or we were confusing our Nick Bredon origin story. I attributed the Nick Bredon error to our old boss at Shack News, Steve Gibson, or possibly me mistyping your name as Nick Bredon when we introduced you to the site. But I think what I might have been remembering was me for like a month after we hired you, persistently mistyping your name as Nick Breton.
Oh yeah.
I did that for like weeks.
I remember that.
Because I just kept, it was like a word that seemed more real to me than Brecken.
Right, yeah.
And I yeah, so sorry about that. Like a decade later.
It's fine.
So there's an alternate Nick Bredon origin story that is more based in verifiable documentation sent to us by Icebreaker, who remembers this somehow. And this is amazing to me. This is March 31st, 2009, and he links the Shack News like community chat post that documents it. This Shack News poster is writing in 2009. So I'm in class, not paying attention as usual, when I go to msnbc.com, one of my daily news sites, and on the front page they have a picture, an article about the thing that will forever change gaming, the OnLive thing. Anyway, I was skimming when I saw this. Quote, Nick Bredon of the enthusiast site Shack News wrote that he saw, quote, blocky pixels, unquote, playing, quote, BioShock, unquote, over OnLive and proclaimed it, quote, unquestionably inferior to playing from a disc, unquote.
Good, I'm glad it was that quote.
Those who commented on blog posting ranged from cautiously optimistic to nastily disdainful, end quote. MSNBC, March 31st, 2009. Nick Bredon.
God.
They apparently that day fixed the story and corrected your name.
No, I remember that.
Fortunately, the
screenshot lives on. Or the pull quote.
The pull quote lives on,
Yeah, it's really weird. I had completely forgotten about that.
It is true, Nick, that playing over a streaming service 10 years ago would have been vastly inferior to playing on a disc.
It is true.
I guess people didn't know that, though, when OnLive first came out.
This was only 6 years ago.
They were claiming that it was imperceptible.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. So, but, yeah.
Vastly inferior.
Vastly.
That was Nick Bredon, though.
Yeah,
they erroneously.
What can you say?
They erroneously edited the article later to attribute it to you, but we all know that it was Nick Bredon. Still waiting for that correction, MSNBC.
Yeah, I mean, actually, as I've learned looking at Ancestry.com, the Brecken name has been corrupted many times.
Oh, sure.
It's pretty common in history to screw up my name. Yeah. Like, it's not the first time, nor will it be.
There's a lot of Nick Bredons out there. Let's just say it.
Yeah, there's probably a whole family of them that I don't know about.
Well, there might be. There may well be, because Hugh O'Brien sends us an email with including a photograph of a bottle of champagne, and it is Bredon Champagne Brut. And here it's just this straight up Bredon.
Wow.
It says Bredon on
Good.
it. Yep. True champagne, I guess, not sparkling wine. Legit champagne.
That's from back when this branch of the Bredons were from when Nick was the king of France.
Yeah.
They later renamed themselves the Bredons after he murdered a 6-year-old child to disassociate themselves. They moved out of Chateau Bredon.
Yep.
Right.
Humble winemakers.
Let's see.
Humble Weinhändlers.
They became humble Weinhändlers. In that Crusader Kings Weinhändler DLC.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Austin Studebaker writes, Nick Bredon's murdering grandpa is in Dwarf Fortress. Hi, Thumbs. I just listened to episode 240, and Nick's story of his cave-dwelling murderous ancestor immediately made me think of multiple phenomena in Dwarf Fortress. In Dwarf Fortress, people are cursed with various forms of lycanthropy at world generation. The beauty is that the animal they are a weir creature of is randomly pulled from a pool, so you can find weir lizards, weir donkeys, weir badgers, etc. in adventure mode. Once you build up enough renown by doing procedurally generated quests, you can be asked by the lord of a region to kill a weir creature nearby. You recruit a number of companions by building your renown. When you arrive at the cave of the creature, you'll find various corpses of nearby villagers throughout. So, to some, a guy goes out, murders people, and brings back the corpses to a cave. A king, parentheses lord, and 500 men, approximately 5 companions, hunt down this man and kill him. Somewhat similarly, minotaurs exist within the game and live in labyrinths. When they detect your character, they call out insults, perhaps like the German man, and tell you they will grind your bones, which is a bit like an actual skill in the game, bone crafting. I'm rambling now, but I love talking about the beauty of the absolute piece of art that is one man's precious brainchild, Dwarf Fortress. Thanks, Austin Studebaker, Uber on the forums.
I've never played Dwarf Fortress.
I haven't either, and I always feel like I should.
It's crazy that neither of you two people have played
I'm
Dwarf
just
Fortress.
Probably
intimidated by
Dwarf.
it. That's like the truth.
That's
but I really should play it.
You should get JP Leberton to give you a Dwarf Fortress, like Dwarf Fortress 101, first 2 hours.
Yeah.
Because he is or was really, really into that game.
Yeah, definitely. So Dan Thiel writes, "Hi Thumbs. Last week you were talking about Star Wars Base Command, the game in Battlefront's companion app and on the web where I play it because I'm a sad Windows Phone user. And you were speculating it's probably a clone of something. Well, it is. When I first played Base Command, the first thing that struck me was how similar it is to the board game Castle Panic. Castle Panic is a co-op game where you're trying to defend a castle located in the center of the board. The play area consists of a series of concentric circles divided up into sections pizza style. Enemies spawn on the outer ring of the board and move closer ring by ring at the end of each turn. You play cards from your hand to attack these enemies. These cards are mainly soldiers capable of attacking specific parts of the board with a few buffs and attacks mixed in. When the enemies reach the center, they take out the walls that protect your castle, they move in and destroy your towers. This is almost exactly what happens in Star Wars Base Command, but the Star Wars game adds a collectible card game element. In addition to your units, X-Wings, Rebel Soldiers, you have, etc., you have a deck of cards that gives you various boosts and special attacks. And as Nick mentioned, welcome back, Nick, you can build custom decks to help you beat tougher levels. With a greater variety of cards and stats, this actually makes the free Star Wars game a bit deeper than the board game. Plus, by earning credits for Battlefront, you get to synergize content across platforms in the EA digital ecosystem. When you play Castle Panic, all you get is the pleasure of your friend's company. Anyway, Castle Panic is a fun, simple game, and it's a great way to introduce people to co-op tabletop. It has a few expansions, and there are zombie and munchkin varieties that appear a bit more complex than the original game. Base Command, for all its cloniness, is also pretty enjoyable in its own right, synergy or no. And I suppose it's possible both games are clones of some other earlier game. I think someone else also pointed out a board game that this is apparently very similar.
Not surprised.
Maybe there's a whole genre of concentric circle castle defense games with its own lingo, like inner ring tension extender and such. Anyway, keep potting the great cast, or however that goes. I don't know how to end email. Dan Thiel at what where Dan.
The face you made when you said inner ring tension extender was like eh?
And, yeah, DLC for your Rez suit.
This weird Christmas song about murdering Englishmen started playing.
When I installed my inner ring tension extender.
All right, so this is very relevant to the sort of our first topic on this week's podcast. Preposterous writes, "Hi, I've realized lately that one of the things I dislike about many modern games is clinical perfection. Many AAA titles feel soulless to me because of a lack of rough edges. When I think about my favorite games, I realize many of them are pretty janky and rife with design decisions that run counter to what is understood as good design. Think of games like Morrowind with its misdirection, painfully slow movement speed, and broken magic and combat systems, or, here it comes, Far Cry 2, with frustrating and unwelcoming systems, and how much more interesting those games are than many of their successors. Or how the first two Half-Life games don't feel like they've had the soul play tested out of them, unlike many Valve games that came after. Or how poor translation, confusion, and odd controls add to the atmosphere of games like Stalker and Pathologic. Am I alone in feeling this way, or do you think that overpolishing a game can harm its character? And do you think there's even the slightest chance that mainstream gaming might move away from the clinical, playtested-to-hell development process and learn to appreciate what a bit of jankiness and rough edges can add to a game? Thanks for the years of insight and entertainment, Preposterous." I'm sorry, I'm pronouncing your name wrong, certainly.
The first thing that this actually reminds me of is the article that Zach McClendon wrote for Wired recently about Fallout 4 and about how about Bethesda's tendency to maybe do what some people would call biting off too many things, too many crazy systems, and allowing your game to get too shaggy at the edges. Like these sort of, there's a type of complaint about Bethesda games that is just like, oh, buggy Bethesda, so many bugs, why isn't everything perfect? And his argument in this article in Wired, which was
a great article.
It was a great article. It was called "Fallout 4 is full of bugs, but fixing them could ruin it." That's basically his premise. Is this game has all of the things that people find amazing about it because the designers at Bethesda are okay with basically stitching up the edges of the game just enough that things literally don't spill out of the world and onto the kill plane. But beyond that, like, it's okay for you to press out into the fringes of the world because
and to the allowable like reaches of its systems.
Of all elements of this game, because without that willingness, you're not going to get some of the most amazing emergent things that come out of Fallout or out of a Bethesda game. And the only solutions to stitching up, like to really making that feel perfectly cohesive, are probably ones that are going to end up actually excising some of those weird tendrils from the game entirely in the name of making it a perfect, like a hermetically sealed experience.
His argument, as I would put it, because I think it was misunderstood by a lot of people who took issue with it. His argument is not so much that you can't fix any one bug. Like, it's not that you can't fix any of those bugs and they have to all be there forever, or the game's going to be bad. It's that the attitude that is like the development priority that is required in order to successfully close out all or most of those bugs is just inevitably also going to have the collateral damage of sending off a lot of the kind of interesting design outliers that provide the kinds of stories that people actually love about those games. Like it is that you kind of have to pick one. Like there's a certain degree to which you can just like arbitrarily spot fix bugs that come up with because of the openness of these systems. But once your priority is make all that stuff bulletproof, that will just inevitably bring along with it consequences that shrink the possibility space of the game.
Yeah, because the only reality of bulletproofing everything in a thing this complicated is make there be fewer things that you have to bulletproof.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a really, and I'm not as, I mean, we're talking about like the biggest selling sort of mainstream game of recent memory, right? So like, I totally get what the reader is talking about, but I don't necessarily agree that is just gone from mainstream gaming, because here we are talking about Fallout 4. And you know, whether
a lot of pieces of Metal Gear Solid 5 also feel like they had this, although eventually it seems like that fell off a cliff to its detriment, where it just sort of they stopped caring to too much of a degree. But
but when you're in the meat of that game, it is absolutely just like hugely it is capacious in its possibility, which in a good way. And then obviously there's an entire strain, you know, I mentioned Minecraft and all those survival games. Like, that is a huge strain of extremely popular modern game design right now, and that is all about that stuff. So yeah, I think that's, and you know, that relates to what I was saying earlier about kind of the graphical fidelity thing, right? Like, it's very related. Like, if you want a game where everything in it is property based and component based and systemic and all interlocks in a harmonious and not special cased way, there's just like a limit to how much graphical fidelity, sort of seamlessness you're going to get. And that's one of the reasons I think it's cool that we're seeing games like the System Shock 1 remake and the new System Shock 3 and Underworld Ascendant and stuff like that, because they clearly just, I just suspect those games have budgets that wouldn't allow them to chase kind of the Uncharted branch of polish, but also like that's just their designers have the right priorities for those series, I think. Yep. So I think there's not really like, you're not at all, I don't think in 2015 you're at a loss for material if that's the kind of game you like. You know, I mean, I think there's stuff to play for sure.
Yep.
All right, let's see. I should have picked the next.
We could just call it and talk about the Idle Weekend podcast.
Oh, that's true. We should talk about the Idle Weekend podcast. Yes. We have been promising a new podcast from Danielle Riendo, formerly of this podcast, and Rob Zachney, still currently of 3 Moves Ahead and Esports Today, both on the Idle Thumbs Network. We've been promising a new podcast from them for months now.
Yeah, I know a lot of people have been really bummed that Danielle left Idle Thumbs and has not been on a podcast, even though we've been
bummed about it too.
Yeah, we've been really bummed. But
we acted as though it was going to be a smooth transition of just like, and as soon as she's off this one, put a new Danielle cast right in your ears.
Yeah, well, it now exists. It's called Idle Weekend. The first episode came out on Friday of last week. It's
ideally there will be another one this Friday.
Yes. It's called Idle Weekend. It's a podcast that's, I guess, meant to be sort of a cap on the week of gaming. Danielle and Rob talk about what they've been playing and about some events like in the news, but also like last week's episode got into like interesting personal stuff about their play habits and like games. You like the segment that struck me the most, and also I've seen a lot of people talk about, is the games that you seek out when you're feeling down or depressed or have had like a really bad week. And I thought the stuff they talked about in that segment like was
that was great.
It was interesting and good.
Yeah. It's not a downer of a podcast.
It's not. No, I mean, like their first segment in last week was about their response to this year's Game Awards, Jeff Keighley's Game Awards show that started off as the Spike VGAs, and where it's sort of, because it had a bunch of controversy this year about representation on the judging board and how that played out in the show itself. That segment was also really good. And
then they also, in addition to games, they also, their intention, and this is true in the first episode certainly, is to just talk about other kind of culture and pop culture stuff that they're into recently. So last week they talked about Jessica Jones, the Netflix show,
and Fargo season 2.
So yeah, it's mainly games. I would say about 2/3 games, 1/3 kind of just general stuff that's in the air in entertainment. And they have a really good rapport. We all knew each other back when we all lived in Boston. Rob still lives in Boston.
You, Rob, and Danielle.
Yes, which is how they all sort of became. That's why we're all connected on the Idle Thumbs network now, is because we all knew each other back then. So it's great. You can find it at idleweekend.net.
You can subscribe to it on iTunes as well.
Yeah,
obviously.
It's on iTunes. You can obviously any podcast catcher you have will find it if you search for Idle Weekend. And it's people who've listened to it like it a lot so far. We're building an audience from scratch with that. We're hoping obviously that talking about it on this podcast will give it a nice boost. But if you do, we always say this about this podcast, and it continues to be true. If you like this podcast, or if you like Idle Weekend when you listen to it, please tell your friend, anyone you think might also like it, because that is the way that we grow these podcasts. And we're really hoping that that Idle Weekend can be something that will stick around and will just get better and better and build its own audience that hopefully has crossover with this one, but maybe also can grow a new audience. That would be awesome for Rob and Danielle. So idleweekend.net, starting strong, I think.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Well, this episode of Idle Thumbs was brought to you by MeUndies.
Always enjoyable to hear you say that, Chris.
I love it. MeUndies provides high quality underwear and other kind of basic garments, and they have a weekly or a monthly sort of unique design that's
a Rez suit.
No, this month is a really great sort of holiday pattern that I have ordered myself already. I am really looking forward to my holiday underwear.
You're going to wear that snowflake Nordic sweater underpants design?
I definitely am.
Every day during the 12 days of Christmas, you
wear the same.
I imagine if that's what you're going to do, you get 12 pairs.
Yeah. So if you go to MeUndies.com/thumbs, you can get 20% off your first order. And as always, free shipping in the United States and Canada. So MeUndies.com/thumbs. Get your Christmas boxers. And I guess that's it for our podcast this week.
Bye.
Sorry. You can find us on Twitter at Idle Thumbs, and you can also follow Idle Weekend, new Twitter account at Idle Weekend on Twitter. Yes, please listen to that podcast, and thanks for joining us.
See you.
Bye. 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 Bye.